My name is Deputy Chief Derek Swope of the Altoona Police Department. Today we're going to go through an incident that occurred in the city of Altoona. This morning at approximately 9:14 a.m., Altoona police officers received a call of a suspicious male at a local restaurant. It was reported that the male matched the description of the UnitedHealthcare murder in New York City. When officers arrived, they made contact with the male who had a face mask on. That male was asked to remove his face mask, and officers immediately recognized him as a suspect in the New York City shooting in recent days. That male was asked for a form of identification. He then provided a fake identification card out of New Jersey. After a brief investigation, it was determined that the ID provided was in fact a fake ID, and he was subsequently arrested for a forgery charge. Once he was taken into custody for that forgery charge, he was transported to the Altoona Police Department. Once at the Altoona Police Department, that male was searched instant to arrest. It was discovered that he had a United States passport that identified him as, Luigi Mangione. From there, continued search of his property. A firearm was located, and a suppressor was also located. There were also other items of evidentiary value that were located that would assist in this investigation. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Governor Shapiro for some words.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Swope, and let me acknowledge and thank the law enforcement who I'm joined with today, beginning with Lieutenant Colonel Bivens of the Pennsylvania State Police. I want to thank Senior Special Supervisory Agent Szabo from the FBI, and acknowledge NYPD Commissioner Daughtry and the women and men of the NYPD who join us here today, District Attorney Weeks, who you will hear from shortly, and I just concluded a briefing with Mayor Adams and Commissioner Tisch from New York. I want to begin by thanking our fellow Pennsylvania resident who acted as a hero today. Pennsylvania resident saw something early this morning at McDonald's and said something to our local police. And our local police here in Altoona acted swiftly. I want to say a special thanks to Officer Tyler Fry of the Altoona Police Department. Officer Fry is about 6 months into his time serving his fellow people here in Pennsylvania, and he acted swiftly. He acted with smarts, and he acted with calm. You know, safety often turns on the strength of the relationship between the community and law enforcement. We have that strong relationship here in Altoona, and it was proven here today. I want to ask all of our fellow Pennsylvanians to demonstrate the same type of thoughtfulness and courage and smarts as the individual at McDonald's did this morning, and help law enforcement here in Pennsylvania as we continue with our investigation. You'll see photos of the suspect who is here, and you should know that this suspect traveled between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, making stops in between, obviously here in Altoona. I want to ask all of our fellow Pennsylvanians to help us with any tips that they might have by contacting us at 800-4-PA-TIPS. Again, that number is 800-4-PA-TIPS. The suspect was just arraigned here in the courthouse, and presumably New York will file charges very, very soon. That process will continue to play out, and justice will be delivered in this case. This case is hinged on attention. In fact, the attention in this case and the killing of Brian Thompson was helpful, no doubt, in allowing us to capture this killer in alerting that individual at McDonald's this morning and then having that individual contact police. But some attention in this case, especially online, has been deeply disturbing, as some have looked to celebrate instead of condemning this killer. Brian Thompson was a father to two. He was a husband, and he was a friend to many. And yes, he was the CEO of a health insurance company. In America, we do not kill people in cold blood to resolve policy differences or express a viewpoint. I understand people have real frustration with our healthcare system, and I have worked to address that throughout my career. But I have no tolerance, nor should anyone, for one man using an illegal ghost gun to murder someone because he thinks his opinion matters most. In a civil society, we are all less safe when ideologues engage in vigilante justice. In some dark corners, this killer is being hailed as a hero. Hear me on this. He is no hero. The real hero in this story is the person who called 911 at McDonald's this morning. The real heroes every day in our society are the women and men who put on uniforms like these and go out in our communities to keep us safe. This killer was not a hero. He should not be hailed. Mr. Thompson, I understand, was laid to rest earlier today in Minnesota in a private setting. As the conversation continues about this case, let's be mindful not to dehumanize him and make him just an avatar of a system that is disliked by many. He was a father, he was a husband, and he did not deserve to die like this on a sidewalk in New York City. I again want to thank all law enforcement who's present here this evening. Law enforcement works best when it works together. In this case, you have the New York Police Department working together with the Altoona Police Department, working together with our Pennsylvania State Police and our partners at the federal level as well. Everyone came together to solve this case and keep the public safe. I again want to ask my fellow Pennsylvanians, if you have any information regarding this suspect or his travels throughout Pennsylvania, please share those tips with us immediately. And with that, I want to thank District Attorney Weeks for his important work today and invite him to the microphone to say a few words.
Thank you, Governor Shapiro. Good evening, everyone. I would echo the governor's sentiments. Law enforcement does work at its best when they work together. I'd also like to thank District Attorney Seidel. He and his staff came down from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office today in record time to assist us at the Altoona Police Department. And as the governor stated, the state police, the Altoona Police Department, the FBI, the New York City Police Department, Logan Township Police Department, the Blair County Sheriff's Department, and other agencies all worked together today to do what needed to be done to seek justice. I often brag about how the community in Blair County isn't afraid to say something, to report a crime, to contact local law enforcement. And I've often touted how they've made their community, whether it be Altoona or somewhere else, a safer place to live. And today I submit that a resident from Altoona and the Altoona Police Department helped make New York City a safer place to live and helped to kickstart the process to seek justice for a senseless killing. So again, I'd like to thank everybody, and it's my honor to introduce Deputy Commissioner Daugherty at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DA. On behalf of the New York City Mayor Eric Adams, my boss, Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch, wants to extend, once again, their appreciation to the Altoona Police Department, to your leadership team, the federals, state, local authorities, and especially to the customer at the McDonald's that seen something, says something, to the McDonald's employee that called 911 and reported this individual inside of their restaurant. The men and women behind me, the detectives, some of these detectives I've stated behind me haven't been home since Tuesday when this incident happened. They've been working this case tirelessly around the clock. And when they got that phone call, immediately they jumped in their car, the police car, and raced down here to go see if this was the individual that we were looking for. That's dedication. Their commitment to bringing this individual to justice is just standing behind me. And on behalf of the mayor and the police commissioner, they extend their thanks and appreciation to you as well. Here's a message to the criminal element that think that they want to commit a crime in New York City and cross state lines, county lines. The message is very clear. Police Commissioner Tish's police department will find you and bring you to justice. Just look behind me. Thank you. Anybody else?
I think with that, we'll be happy to try and take a few questions.
Governor, question, I guess maybe for the local law enforcement about the arrest specifically today. I don't know who that would be.
We'll defer to Altoona, please.
I guess I'm curious if we could hear a little bit more about the dynamics, if you could step to the podium, sir. If we could hear a little bit more about the dynamics inside that McDonald's. I know there was some detail in the affidavit about what happened when the individual was asked if he'd been to New York. Could you speak a little bit to his demeanor and how that played out?
Sure. So it was a peaceful arrest, first and foremost. The officer quickly recognized the male as the suspect from the shooting. And within several minutes, seconds of the first contact, he had asked the suspect if he had been in New York City recently. And that really invoked a physical reaction from the suspect. He became visibly nervous, kind of shaking at that question. And he didn't really answer it directly. So that statement alone really said a lot. And the suspect didn't have to say a lot after that question to show that, you know, he was very nervous at that point.
Would that the officer that the governor mentioned who's new on the job, who was involved in that?
Yes, so Officer Fry's here to my left. Officer Fry, can you step this way a little bit? And then his partner that he was with, Officer Joe Detweiler.
Officer, could you maybe identify yourself and maybe describe that whole interaction and what played out? Spell your name.
Yeah, Patrolman Fry, Tylerfrye. So whenever we got on scene there, we were able to pretty much find where he was at in the restaurant. And as soon as he was wearing a blue medical mask. As soon as we pulled that down, or we asked him to pull it down, me and my partner and I recognized him immediately, just from what we saw in the media with photos, videos. We just didn't even think twice about it. We knew that was our guy, but he was very cooperative with us. Didn't really give us too many issues. Once we found out his identity, we took it from there.
How does it feel after 6 months on the job as a law enforcement officer to be part of his arrest?
I can't say I was expecting it by any means, but it feels good to get a guy like that off the street, especially starting my career this way. It feels great.
So upon his arrest, has he made any statements since his arrest? Has he asked for a lawyer yet?
To my knowledge, he hasn't made any statements.
How long was he staying in Altoona, and where was he staying? And then was the gun on himself, or was it in like a car somewhere?
We are still investigating how long he's been in Altoona. There's still a lot of follow-up to do in this case. Again, the men and women behind me are assisting with that. So we're still looking into it.
I'm going to ask Lieutenant Colonel Bivens of the Pennsylvania State Police to address the question you just raised. Thank you.
So there are a lot of things that need to be followed up yet in this investigation. Certainly, there were a number of items that were found on his person, in his backpack, that have been inventoried, and we've begun to do an analysis of some of those. There were written documents. There are electronic devices that are in the process of being downloaded. Search warrants are obtained. And so over the next hours and days, those efforts will continue. And we're going to take a closer look at all of the information that we can glean from that regarding his activities up until and during the time of the homicide, his flight from New York. And we know that he has been in Pennsylvania, excuse me, for several days. And so part of that investigation will also focus on trying to retrace his steps. We've already identified businesses, for example, that he frequented in this area and activities that he engaged in. That led us to more evidence. And so all of that is becoming kind of a mountain of evidence that has to be analyzed and looked at. I'm confident we'll have a much better idea of his activities over the past number of days in New York and in Pennsylvania. Additionally, we're also trying to determine that we don't have another actor or an accomplice out there. And so this information will all be used to help us prove or disprove whether that exists and whether there were any other intended targets. So a lot of questions that are out there that are unanswered yet, but we have a lot of information that we can examine that hopefully will give us some of those pieces of data that we need. You asked, or someone asked about the interview. He was initially cooperative. He is not now. And so he has been arraigned and transported and will be securely housed pending the filing of additional charges in New York.
So
Governor Shapiro, you mentioned that he was in Pittsburgh at some point. Is that correct? What
Yes.
do you know about that time in Pittsburgh?
We're not going to get into any more details at this time. We would like to hear from any Pennsylvanian or any Pittsburgher who had any sightings or any dealings with the individual. That's why I specifically asked for anyone with tips to share that with us.
Can you talk about the extradition to New York? How does that process work? I know that you have your piece here, but what happens with the New York part of it?
And how long does it take?
Thank you.
So that answer depends. Once the charging documents are filed in the state of New York, we will file a fugitive justice complaint against the defendant. He'll be brought before a common pleas judge shortly thereafter, and the defendant will be presented with the option to waive his extradition or to contest his extradition. If he waives his extradition, we, of course, will make him available to the NYPD and the Manhattan District Attorney's Office as soon as we're able to arrange his transportation there. If he contests it, that process typically takes between 30 and 45 days to do the requisite paperwork, but we do that all the time in our office, and that's kind of a normal procedure.
On the matter of the backpack itself right now, the backpack itself, you had the one that was in New York. Do we know if that's the same one that he had the time of the shooting there, or is this backpack that he had here one that he may have acquired? And the findings inside, the gun, the silencer, and cash, some foreign currency as well, is that correct?
I'll defer to someone else. I'm not going to speculate on any of the interpretation of the evidence. I'm going to rely on the officers doing the investigation to complete that and reach their conclusions.
Can we say that at this point he is a suspect in the hit on the United CEO? Can we call him a suspect at this point? Obviously, he was arrested on other.
Yes, as we confirmed at his preliminary arraignment, with the permission of District Attorney Seidel, we expect charges to be filed forthwith. And obviously, that I'm not going to speculate on that timing, but tonight or tomorrow or sometime in the very near future for homicide.
Any insight into a murder?
Sorry, sir, can I just ask? In terms of the officers investigating this case, can you say any more about a suspected possible motive?
So at this point, we're not going to comment on that. I mentioned that there is a lot of information to go through. Certainly everything has been or will be shared with NYPD, but there is other information that really doesn't even pertain to that investigation. It, again, focuses more on his activities here in Pennsylvania and other travels. So all of that hopefully will shine more light on it. There is some information that gives us some insight into his thinking, but again, all part of the ongoing investigation. Way too early to discuss that.
More about the document that's found, the handwritten document.
As far as the NYPD, we're not going to be commenting on the investigation steps here. In the next couple of days, there'll be immediate availability at One Police Plaza, and Commissioner Tisch will update. Commissioner Tisch and the Chief of Detectives, Joe Kinney, will update the media at One Police Plaza. But I will be happy to talk about that. The Commissioner Tisch and the New York City Mayor did FaceTime Officer Fry and then thanked them for their service. So that was he got a pretty cool phone call from the mayor and our police commissioner.
Do we know how he got to Pennsylvania? Was it through aircraft, train, bus? How did he arrive in Pennsylvania?
Again, we do have a good idea of that, but all part of the ongoing investigation.
But just to clarify, Governor, you had suggested, I think I heard you, I want to make sure I heard it right, that he, I guess he took a bus from the terminal that drove crossing the bridge to Philly, and then from there he was around the state and wound up here, or is that can you be any more specific about how you think this works?
Well, again, I'll jump in. It's all part of the ongoing investigation. And so, yes, we do have a good idea how he got from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh, but there are some gaps in time. And so before we start laying out a timeline of his travel, we really need to work through all of that. And so we know that at some point it is likely he was in a variety of locations across the state, to include Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and points in between.
And then Altoona, so Philadelphia, then Pittsburgh, and then he made his way back here.
Again, that'll all be part of the, logically, he's caught here in Altoona, so logically he was in those locations first. But again, the timeline of all of that will be part of the ongoing investigation.
What was that? Evade detection for several days. Obviously, he was caught at a McDonald's this morning. Guy's got to eat. For the past few days, he's been on the run for multiple days at this point. How did he manage to evade detection for so long?
So I think, again, as part of the ongoing investigation, when we determine where he's been, where he stayed, those kinds of things, we may be able to answer some of those questions. But right now I will tell you that based on everything that we have seen, he was very careful with trying to stay low profile, avoid cameras, not all that successfully in some cases, but that was certainly the effort he was making. He took steps to try and, avoid detection with some of the electronic devices and things as well. So, again, all part of the investigation, but clearly, somebody that was very security conscious and trying to avoid somebody
that. He has no
fine.
criminal record, and this was a name that was not previously known to law enforcement?
I am not aware of a criminal history on this individual.
Could you speak to those tech evasion devices? It was mentioned in the hearing, and then the defendant said that those were waterproofing bags. Could you speak a little bit more to what was taken into evidence today?
No, not at this point. Again, I've spoken generally about what's there, but at this point, everything remains under investigation, and we'll have much more information, and New York will certainly have information for you in the future.
How confident are you this is the suspect? Is there still a search for any other suspects other than the accomplice or potential accomplice?
We're still going to canvass. We're still going to investigate. Like I said before, we're going to provide an update in a couple of days by the police commissioner and the chief of detectives back at New York. I will say this, though, if anybody out there that has any information that they think that will help this case, to please contact our tip line, which is 1-800-577-TIPS. Remember, all calls are kept confidential.
Just to clarify, the customer spoke with the employee called 911?
Yes, that's right. That is my understanding, yes, sir.
Was it a customer that recognized the suspect first, told an employee, and the employee rang police? Is that correct?
The employee recognized also.
Yes, my understanding, I was just confirming, but my understanding is the employee became suspicious, thought they recognized, and wanted someone to check it out further.
Did someone refer to a customer?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I'm sorry, did I say the employee? The customer recognized, notified an employee, and wanted someone to check it out further.
Can you confirm which restaurant it was? Was it the one on Plank Road?
I'm not familiar with the address of that. It's a McDonald's.
Does local police know?
Is that it? Yes, they tell me it is.
The suspect disputed the currency. Can you explain why there might be discrepancy or how much he was found to have?
Again, we're not going to talk about what was found in the bag. We have accurately cataloged everything that was in there, and that'll be a matter for the future.
DA Weeks, could you repeat what you said in court about that money?
I certainly stand by all the comments I made at the preliminary arraignment, but I'm not going to comment any more on the evidence at this time. My comments at preliminary arraignment were in support of my argument for bail. Thank you.
We probably have time for one or two more questions. Is he being held at a county or state facility?
He will likely be taken to a state correctional institution later this evening.
Can I just say specifically for Pennsylvania law enforcement, over the past few months, you've had attempted assassination of a former president, now president-elect. Now you've had this. What do you think about that?
Violence can never be used to address political differences or to address a substantive difference or to try and prove some ideological point. That is not what we do in a civilized society. That was true in Butler. It was true in New York City. And it's true anywhere. That is not how you make progress in this country. The person, the suspect here, who shot at that CEO and killed that CEO is a coward, not a hero. And we need to make sure that in this country, we get back to having a civil discourse about our differences. And that is an important lesson coming out of Pennsylvania, and it is one that I think the rest of the nation needs to hear as well. On a law enforcement side, I will tell you that I am...
All right, good evening. I'm Ellison Barber. That was Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro there. You were just listening to a press conference from Blair County, Pennsylvania, where 26-year-old Luigi Mangione was arraigned on felony weapons charges. He is the person of interest in the deadly shooting of the UnitedHealthcare CEO, and he was taken into custody in Pennsylvania this morning. We have just learned Mangione has been charged with 2 felonies and 3 misdemeanors. Those are tied to the gun and ID that was allegedly discovered on him when police were called to a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Again, that was earlier this morning. Take a look at some new video that we're just getting in as well. This video here is showing the 26-year-old in handcuffs as he is walked towards the building ahead of his arraignment on those weapon charges. So far, we're told he has been denied bail, but he did not enter a plea. Let's bring in NBC News' Stephanie Gosk, who is in Altoona, Pennsylvania tonight for us. Stephanie, walk us through what stood out to you from that press conference. What did we learn from officials there that was new?
Sure, Allison, most notably was the fact that the arresting officer was just 6 months on the job of police officer when he was called to this McDonald's this morning around 9 a.m. or so. There was an employee here that recognized Mangione. Those pictures have been circulating, thought he looked suspicious and called police here. The officer and his partner arriving on the scene, what he described in that press conference, is coming in, starting to talk to Luigi Mangione, asking him to pull down a medical mask that he was wearing. He says he and his partner immediately knew that that's who they were looking at. And they asked him if he had been in New York City recently. And when they asked him that question, he became nervous and started to shake. He also, we are told from law enforcement, showed a fake New Jersey ID. And that fake New Jersey ID was the same one that was shown by the person of interest at the hostel in New York City when he checked in. It was among a number of things that they found on him, a number of fake IDs, a laptop that he was working on. He also had clothes that were similar to the shooter's clothes, and most importantly, perhaps, a gun and what they were calling a suppressor that looked like the weapon used in the shooting 5 days ago in Midtown Manhattan. All of this being pulled together, but it's important to make the point that he has not been charged yet with the murder of Brian Thompson, the CEO of UnitedHealthcare. He's being held on those weapons charges, as well as lying to police about his identity, Allison.
Yeah, that's right. So again, for viewers at home, he is currently charged in Pennsylvania with 2 felonies, 3 misdemeanors. Those 2 felonies are forgery in the 2nd degree, presumably related to a false identification, as well as a firearms count carrying without a license in the 3rd degree. In terms of those misdemeanors, they are tampering with government records or identification, possessions of an instrument, meaning a weapon, as well as a false ID. We are told from our team inside of that courtroom there was no plea. He was only asked if he understood the charges, and he said he did. Stephanie, one thing that also stood out to me in that press conference was hearing police there talk about what happens next, an extradition to New York, and the possibility of Luigi Mangione deciding to waive his extradition rights. Walk us through what could happen here next. New York police, they are in Altoona trying to question him, right?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, while we were standing here, we saw a motorcade go zooming by. That was the NYPD with lights flashing. They are here. They're going to question him. They're going to, if they're going to charge him, they may do that soon. But there has to be a process that has to be held. You know, as you mentioned, he is charged with a number of crimes here in Pennsylvania. So there will be an extradition process. There is also a hearing that he is scheduled to have December 23rd. So Luigi Mangione is not leaving Pennsylvania anytime soon, and they certainly aren't going to let him out of jail, that's for sure.
And Stephanie, in terms of how he ended up in Altoona, walk us through what police say they think he did in the days after, allegedly, if he is in fact the person New York has been looking for, the New York Police Department, what he did during his time in Pennsylvania and where they think he may have gone.
Well, Allison, we knew from law enforcement officials that the day of the murder of CEO Brian Thompson, that the person of interest went to a bus station in northern Manhattan, and then they lost the trail, according to what they said publicly. So they believed, or it certainly would lead someone to believe, that he took a bus from that bus station over the GW Bridge, which leads to New Jersey and eventually to Pennsylvania. The governor in this press conference saying he went to Philadelphia, that he then went to Pittsburgh, and then that he came to Altoona. They didn't give any details, and what a lot of people were asking in that press conference about where he might have stayed and where he may have gone over that period of time. I mean, you're talking about 5 full days, and one of the most remarkable things about this case was that it took as long as it did to find him. The police in New York City saying they did not have an identity, but what they did say today is that those photos that were released, and they released quite a few, but particularly the ones of him in the hostel where you could see his face, that those were critical to making an arrest in this case. That is what the employee here at this McDonald's recognized, and that is why the employee called 911, got the police to come here, and eventually that's why we're here now with this arrest being made, Allison.
All right, Stephanie Gosk in Altoona, Pennsylvania on that breaking news. Thank you. We appreciate it. We're going to stay on this story because the person of interest in the murder of the UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson here in New York, his online posts and social media feeds, they are all now seeming to play key roles in the investigation as it unfolds. So here to help us break this down and the latest developments in this case is NBC's Tom Winter. Tom, I want to kind of pick up where Stephanie left off because you've been so careful, rightly so, in your reporting. And as far as the NYPD and the FBI's investigation goes, this individual, Luigi Mangione, is still considered not a suspect, but a strong person of interest in the murder of the UnitedHealthcare CEO, Brian Thompson. Is that where things still stand in New York right now?
In New York, it does, but in Pennsylvania, Allison, and good evening, what they're looking at now is an argument they made to the judge as far as making sure this individual was not put out on bail, which is effectively saying we expect him to be charged in New York, potentially with a homicide. And so that's where the state of play is in the courthouse. It appears clear to us, at least initially, that they're going to probably charge him based on everything you just heard. But it might take a couple of days, and it can take a couple of days legally, because you know what? His face might match that face. It might match all the other faces that we've been looking at. He might have had the same identification that he had at the hostel on his person today, and the same thing with the weapon. But they have to prove all those things. They have to go back and build this thing together now that they have him, as far as all the elements, and make the argument to the judges in Pennsylvania, hey, we want him out of here. And then they've got to make the argument, ultimately to a judge and a jury, potentially in New York City, if they charge him. So there's some work that needs to be done. This doesn't need to be a perfect case. Okay, so you don't need to sit there and sift through all the evidence and make sure that everything is perfect, like you're ready to go to trial. They'll be able to do a lot, I think, in a short period of time to be able to, show that they have enough reason to get him out of New York.
You know, I was struck, Tom, by Pennsylvania authorities saying that he was initially cooperative in interviews with police, but he is not now. We mentioned social media. This is a young person. He appeared to have a very robust presence online. We have also heard from authorities there in Pennsylvania that they allegedly discovered some sort of writings, a so-called manifesto, when they took him into custody. What do people need to know? What do we know right now about the interest in his online presence and the possibilities of that so-called manifesto that he had with him?
About as high as it gets, Ellison, in plain terms. So they're definitely combing over all those posts. There's been some other items on social media-related platforms that they are looking at. I think that's significant. And so there's some things that will come out, I think, in the next couple hours as we do our reporting and they do their investigation. Actually, flip that around, that we'll be able to talk to you about. But certainly here a little bit more than meets the eye. Ultimately, though, let's take a step back and look at what the governor said. The governor said, look, shooting somebody using violence, if in fact he's charged with that here, for your personal benefit or for the benefit that you think society might have, that's not acceptable. And that's what the governor said. So I think, you know, we can, and we probably will go nuts about all the various accounts that we look at over the next couple of days. But the facts are the facts. If in fact he's charged with homicide, that's not necessarily relevant, Ellison.
And in terms of what happens in the next couple of days, you mentioned that extradition process. It can take a while. The police there saying he has the option, if he chooses in the next 24 hours or so, to waive his extradition rights to New York, assuming New York does charge him in the coming hours. But if he chooses not to waive that right, it could take days. What, in your past experience covering this sort of thing, how long does it typically take to see someone removed from a nearby state like Pennsylvania to get them back here in New York to answer on other charges?
You know, we had a great example in Brian Koberger. The individual's been charged and accused in the University of Utah shootings. Typically, most attorneys say, you know what, let's just get him to the place where he's going to face charges. No reason to duke it out here, because you run the risk, Ellison, particularly in a state where we get the court documents that we get in Pennsylvania, that prosecutors and law enforcement get to put a lot more stuff on the public docket, enough things for me to read, to share with you, and to share to everyone about this individual's background. And so that's just typically, not speaking to this person, but typically a big reason why attorneys say, you know what, let's get them back to face charges in the district where they're charged, and then we'll get everybody to go quiet. So I think that's why that's probably more likely than not here, but you never know.
All right, Justice Correspondent Tom Winter, thank you so much. We appreciate your time and insights on this. For more on the profile of this person of interest and where the investigation may go from here, let's welcome back John Monaghan. He is a retired NYPD captain. He's also the author of a series of detective novels. His latest is The Guns of Antwerp, NYPD Takes Boston. John, thank you for joining us, and I appreciate you jumping in on such a chaotic moment of a lot of information coming to us. If I can you take us back? Let's go back to New York. And this, again, is an individual who police in New York are calling a strong person of interest, not a suspect in the murder here, though based on what we heard in that press conference, it seems that homicide charges are likely coming his way from the state of New York. Given that, let's look at a map and sort of go back to the route we believe Mangione possibly took here. So he was found in Altoona, Pennsylvania. That is over 250 miles west of New York City. We know it appears, based on what we've heard from authorities, that he traveled by bus for at least part of that journey. But then we just heard in that press conference from Pennsylvania authorities that they say they believe there was some sort of traveling that took place between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. And they're asking people in Pennsylvania to come forward with any sort of information they may have. When you look at that track and the course of time we've been dealing with, What do you take away from it? Do you get the sense that this was someone who possibly had a plan for the first 24, maybe 30 hours after this alleged crime occurred, and then sort of was just seeing where he could go? Or does it seem like this was someone that has had the last 5+ days calculated, if in fact this is the suspect in the New York case?
It's well put, because he calculated things to an extent, but not to a great extent. I mean, he was in New York for 10 days prior. What was he doing? Now, this, you know, he left the George Washington Bridge bus terminal. I said this the other day. There's 3 places right now. He's a Greyhound customer by habit. We know this coming up from Atlanta. Greyhound goes to 3 cities out of that bus terminal: Philly, Boston, D.C. So he went to Philly. That's what it looks like. And then from Philly, somehow found his way to Pittsburgh, and then why he came back towards the city east to Altoona. Pittsburgh is further west than Altoona. You know, it's hard to. Hopefully, we'll know the truth soon. And this drives me to my next point. And you really touched on it just a moment ago. We'll find out, depending on how good. See, this is where the real detective work begins. Now that we found him, you said that initially, early this afternoon, they hadn't charged him yet. Not even Pennsylvania. It took him a while, right? And that chief got on and told us that initially he was cooperating, and then he wasn't, and then we charged him. This is exactly how this works. Once he's charged, you have filed an accusatory instrument with the court, absolute right to counsel attaches, you can no longer interrogate. Our guys, the reason we're not charging him, we want to get him in a box. We want to talk to him. If he say, right now, for our New York detectives, for our New York case, he has a qualified right to counsel. In other words, we read him Miranda, he waives, we can talk. He can talk, we can have a conversation. Once he says lawyer, it's all over. But once we file a charge, the right to counsel becomes absolute by law. Once you file the accusatory instrument, you can no longer question. That's why it's going to take a while. If he continues to cooperate and we get a good detective in a box with him, we're not going to charge him until we can see how much we can get him to talk. Once he lawyers up, charge him. That's what's going to happen.
Okay, so as someone who is not a police officer, is not a detective, we're looking at this from the outside and thinking, okay, it looks like they have a lot of evidence in New York. Why haven't they charged him here yet? But you think that could be a strategy on the NYPD's part?
Exactly, absolutely, yes. It's like when we have established probable cause on any case, detective brings it to the boss, says, I think I have probable cause on this guy, sure, go get him. We don't go get an arrest warrant, because that is, in fact, an accusatory instrument, and you have just attached absolute right to counsel. You can't question that guy when you find him. We go, we make the arrest, read Miranda. If he waives, we can talk to him. If he doesn't waive, now we charge him.
I'm curious to get your thoughts on the weapon that, according to police, was found in Luigi Mangione's possession. We have an image of this. This is the firearm. From the outside, it appears to be a fairly standard semi-automatic pistol, but what authorities are saying is, in addition to recovering some sort of silencer in Pennsylvania, they are also suggesting that this possibly could have been made entirely from a 3D printer, a so-called ghost gun. When you look at that, and then also when we go back to the video that I know you have looked at and analyzed on the show throughout this case so far, of this moment where the shooting takes place, and it appeared at some point, a lot of people have talked about this, that weapon jammed and that he seemed to know what to do with it. When you look back on that now with the possibility that this could be a ghost gun, a 3D printed gun, do you think, does that change your opinion of that? Because I heard so many people saying, okay, he knew what to do when it jammed, he must be really trained. But do 3D printed guns, are they just more prone to jamming?
Well, first off, that's not a 3D created gun.
You don't think that is?
No, that's a properly manufactured weapon. I don't even, to tell you the truth, when I'm looking at it in the picture we got on the screen right now,
I think we can go back to it.
That doesn't look like the weapon that they recovered. And I'd like to know how much ammunition did he have in his backpack. He had a backpack on him. That does not look like a 3D created gun, and it could be. I'm no ballistics expert, but that does not. That looks like a properly manufactured gun, and it doesn't look like the murder weapon either. This kid was heading back towards New York. Realize Pennsylvania is well west of Altoona. He's heading back towards New York. How much ammunition did he have? What else was on his mind? He took 10 days in New York before he shot that man. Now he's on the road for 5 days and he's circling back towards New York. I'm not sure that that's the murder weapon that was seen in that picture. It really doesn't resemble the one that I saw. The one that I saw has to specifically be racked after each shot. That's a semi-automatic weapon that you should be able to fire after you rack it once. I mean, there's a lot more that we'll find out once they get him charged. And let's hope they don't charge him soon. We want our detectives to be able to talk to this guy.
So with the NYPD that is in Altoona, Pennsylvania right now, how do you think they are approaching interactions with him?
We're not talking to him yet.
Okay.
No, that's theirs. That's theirs.
So
And
until he's extradited, they can't really do
they don't want to.
Conversation?
They took their shot, tried to talk to him. They succeeded for a little while, it sounds like, and then he lawyered up, and then he charged him. That's exactly the sequence of events on how it's supposed to happen. While we're talking about Altoona, can I just give a great shout out to that kid? Even your Stephanie Goss, you can't mention the fact that he's 6 months out of the academy without smiling. That's just such a great thing. Truly, what happened in Altoona, let's understand just how great it was based on what did not happen. That kid walked up to that table and said, "You've been to New York lately?" His presence, his posture, his entire approach, what did not happen is this man did not commit suicide. Okay, someone in his position may be prone to shoot themselves. We'd never have any answers. He didn't draw and try to fight it out with the cops. He didn't try to run. And think of this. McDonald's is a fast food restaurant, right? By the time he got his food, sat down, started to eat, one person saw him, went to the clerk, clerk calls up, 5 minutes have gone by already. How long does it take to eat your breakfast at McDonald's? That the cop responded immediately. He didn't blow it off and say, "Oh, another sighting." He went there as quickly as he got there really fast. It wasn't like he walked in and had two people saying, "We thought we saw the shooter here." No, he got there quickly at a fast food restaurant. Like, there's so many things that did not happen in Altoona. We have to recognize that. That's really good police work on our kids.
Yeah, Governor Josh Shapiro saying the same thing about that police officer and also calling the bystander who reportedly worked at McDonald's who called into 911 a hero. John Monaghan, retired NYPD detective, author as well. Thank you so much. We appreciate you being here with us tonight. Stay with us because we are going to be right back. Still ahead, the fall of the Assad regime in Syria. Our latest report from the region. Up next. Back now with another major headline we're following tonight, the astonishing shift of power in Syria as rebels drove out the regime that ruled Syria with brutality for decades. Syrian rebels toppling the Assad regime swiftly, taking hold of a small area near Syria's border with Turkey. Then on December 3rd, the opposition taking Aleppo in a few days before advancing south. On December 5th, the rebels taking another city and then heading towards Homs before capturing that city and pushing towards the capital of Damascus. Then finally, on December 8th, rebels taking Damascus and claiming victory after the regime's forces surrendered. Our Richard Engel reports from Damascus as people celebrated and the rebel leader promised a new era of tolerance.
In the main square in Damascus, thousands gathered to cheer the end of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad. Entire families came to witness history in the making.
Syrians have been coming from all over the country to gather here. Hello, I'm from the United States. Welcome. Thank you very much. NBC News. Welcome. How are you feeling today?
Very happy.
Very happy.
Very, very happy.
It seems to be the sentiment here. Everyone says very happy.
Yes.
Wow. So this is a symbol of everything that has transpired here over the last, really just 2 weeks. The rebel forces moved into Damascus and the government and its armed forces simply melted away. We've seen uniforms on the ground. This tank was just abandoned.
Now the tank is in the hands of the people it was used to repress. There is one word I'm hearing over and over again. It is Hurriya, Arabic. And a lot of celebratory gunfire. The rebels were given a hero's welcome. Many are from an Islamist group called HTS, considered a terrorist organization by the U.S. and the United Nations. Their victory was swift after Assad's longtime backers, Russia, Iran, and Hezbollah, did not or could not intervene. Everything will be excellent in our foreign and domestic relations. We don't want to be hostile to anyone, said one fighter. The leader of HTS was once an al-Qaeda commander, although he split from the group years ago. Today, he promised tolerance for all religions and said there would be no restrictions on women's rights. Syrians are overwhelmed by all the sudden changes, and they're getting their first glimpses of Assad's life of luxury. A video claims to show his vast collection of sports cars and SUVs, repossessed by revolution. The rebels have also been freeing political prisoners from a notorious prison, once dubbed the human slaughterhouse. Assad escaped for Moscow, where he and his family were given asylum for humanitarian reasons. With him gone, there is nervousness, but also hope. Refugees are rushing back to write the next chapter of Syria's history.
To show they're serious about uniting this country, tonight the rebels' commander announced a general amnesty for former government employees and soldiers. Ellison?
Richard Engel in Syria, thank you. And in southwestern Syria, the fall of the Assad regime leading to new military action from neighboring Israel. Israeli Defense Forces launching airstrikes near Damascus, they say targeting stockpiles of chemical weapons they're worried could fall into the wrong hands. NBC international correspondent Raf Sanchez has this report from the region.
Tonight, with Syria convulsed in revolutionary chaos, its neighbor Israel taking decisive action. Israeli warplanes carrying out strikes across the country, leaving this airbase near Damascus in flames, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. The target, Israel says, military sites, including the Assad regime's stockpiles of chemical and biological weapons, which it fears could fall into the hands of extremists.
The only interest we have is the security of Israel and its citizens.
Bashar al-Assad, Syria's toppled dictator, used chemical weapons against his own people during 13 bloody years of civil war. President Obama threatened strikes in response.
A red line for us is we start seeing a whole bunch of chemical weapons moving around or being utilized.
But didn't follow through. While President Trump mounted 2 waves of attacks during his first term. Israeli forces are also moving in on the ground, first capturing a buffer zone between Syria and the Israeli-controlled Golan Heights, and then edging troops further into Syria itself.
There was never any love lost between Israel and the Assad regime, but for 50 years, this was Israel's quietest border, and the Israeli government is determined to try to keep it that way.
Syrians fear Israel is taking advantage of their weakness to capture territory. Israel annexed the Golan after its military victory against its Arab neighbors in the 1967 war. But Israel today insisting its aim only to prevent chaos in Syria spilling over.
I emphasize it is a very limited and temporary step we took from security reasons.
The state of Israel and rebel-led Syria now uneasy new neighbors.
And Raf Sanchez joins us now from Tel Aviv. Raf, do we have any sense of the rebels' attitude towards the state of Israel?
So, Ellison, the main rebel group, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, known as HTS, is a Sunni Islamist group. It has its origins in al-Qaeda. That is not an ideological profile that is friendly to Israel, to say the least. On top of that, you have the leader of that group, who is probably the single most powerful man in Syria right now. His family is originally from the Golan Heights. They were displaced by Israeli forces in 1967. That's why he goes by the pseudonym, the nom de guerre, al-Jolani, which literally means in Arabic, from the Golan. So he has personal animus, or reasons for personal animus towards Israel. All of that said, HTS has been very eager to telegraph moderation to the world. They have not been making threats towards Israel. They do seem more interested in domestic governance inside of Syria rather than international jihad outside of it. And there is this irony here that Israel and the rebels share enemies, Iran, Hezbollah, and part of the reason the rebels were successful in overthrowing Assad is that Israel had done so much damage to both Iran and Hezbollah over the last year or so. Ellison.
And Raf, when you're speaking with your sources in the region, what do they and other experts think the fall of Assad could mean for the broader conflict in the Middle East?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, big picture, it is clear this is a major blow to Iran. Syria was a key part of Iran's chain that linked them with Hezbollah on the Mediterranean. Their ability to project power throughout the region pretty severely limited now that Syria has been overtaken by the rebels. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel was actually at a press conference earlier today. He was making the argument that this leaves Hamas in Gaza more isolated because that is one more anti-Israel power in the Assad regime that has fallen away. And he is trying to make the case that this might make Hamas more open towards some kind of deal to release the hostages and to end the war. Ellison.
Raf Sanchez in Tel Aviv, thank you. For more on the future of Syria and its relationship with the U.S. and the international community, let's bring in Wa'el Alzayat, who served as a U.S. Middle East policy expert at the U.S. Department of State for a decade and is also the CEO of Engage Action, a Muslim advocacy organization. Wa'el, thank you for joining us tonight and bearing with us through some of that breaking news earlier. We really appreciate it. We heard President Biden say earlier today, or yesterday rather, that the collapse of the government under Bashar al-Assad was a, quote, fundamental act of justice. He also said that it was a, quote, moment of risk and uncertainty. Do you agree with President Biden on that? And from your perspective, what does the fall of Assad mean for everyday Syrians?
Well, there's certainly a lot of truth. It's not just a fundamental act of justice, but also courage on the part of the Syrian people who have suffered for half a century under one of the most brutal regimes ever known. And I know in your segment, you covered that in terms of what's been revealed and will be revealed from the dungeons of the Syrian regime. What it means moving forward, though, is that really right now it's a moment of truth for the international community as well as the United States. When I served in government, I know that under the Obama administration and really under the Trump and then the Biden administration, there was uncertainty regarding what may come next if Assad falls. And I think that prevented the United States from having a coherent policy in support of a democratic transition in Syria. And so moving forward, I think right now there's an opportunity by both the Biden and the incoming Trump administration to revisit the file and to look at ways to be constructive and certainly, hopefully, to do no harm, because our ability sometimes to mess up in the Middle East are well documented.
Mm-hmm. What do you hope to see from the United States and some of our allies in the coming weeks in particular?
Look, the first thing is the political transition. The Syrians have to get that right, and it has to be Syrian-led. This is not about America. It's not about any other country. It's about Syrians. However, the international community, the United States, Turkey certainly, some of the Arab partners, some European nations, really have a role to play here to be supportive of a peaceful, inclusive, and diverse process that encompasses all of Syria's stakeholders. It's a very diverse country. The second piece is economic assistance. The country is in dire needs of rebuilding, and now Assad is gone. So the set of sanctions that have been levied on the country since the 1970s need to go. However, I'm sure there's going to need to be some conditions and some accountability vis-a-vis the new powers that be on the ground. But that economic piece is so important. And if we don't do it quickly, you can have chaos and a general breakdown in order, which would undermine our other priorities, which is countering terrorism, making sure there's stability, and safeguarding of important institutions.
Do you anticipate a shift in U.S. policy just in the way that we would speak to a new Syrian government? I mean, you mentioned the rebels and the rebel group that is credited with toppling Assad and now seems to be in control of Syria is HTS. And they are, as Raf Sanchez and others mentioned in their reporting, designated as a terror group in the United States. And the U.S. actually has a $10 million bounty on its leader, al-Jolani. But al-Jolani, HTS, and the United States do very clearly have enemies in common now. So do you think there could be a reassessment of who Jolani is? I mean, has Jolani and HTS changed in your research over the years?
I imagine that reassessment is underway right now, and it may not be complete until the new Trump administration takes office. And they're going to need to do their own assessments as well. But there's a few facts here. One is, as you mentioned, Jolani and his organization severed ties with al-Qaeda a few years ago. But more importantly, beyond the perhaps symbolic break, is since they have taken Damascus and the other cities, they have come out with some pretty incredible announcements that need to be obviously tested, but regarding protection of minorities, of women's rights, and of inclusive transition. Now, I think it's upon them to prove it in acts and in deeds. So far, so good, as we say, but we absolutely should be not only cautious, but leveraging some of the items I mentioned, which is the sanctions and their lifting, perhaps the designation of this organization, economic assistance, political support, contingent on a democratic transition that is inclusive and representative of Syria's diverse communities.
And talk to me, too, about where you think Syrians are, everyday people, right now, in terms of what they may be thinking, how they may be processing this shift. So much of the world has looked at Syria, and in the United States in particular, as a place of sorrow, where individual civilians were so mistreated. And I mean, we cannot overstate the egregious human rights violations that have occurred under Bashar al-Assad, particularly in the last decade plus during this civil war. So for the average Syrian, what do you think this moment means right now?
I mean, I am an American, but also I was born and raised in Damascus. My family immigrated when I was a teenager. I've experienced some of the terror and fear instilled by regimes like the Assad regime. It is surreal. It is emotional. It is incredible. It's beautiful, but also uncertain. And I think this was a necessary step that the Syrian people needed to take, irrespective of the challenges ahead.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, for being here. We really appreciate all of your insights tonight. Wa'el Alzayat, CEO of Engage Action. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We're going to be right back. We're back with Top Stories news feed. A nonprofit reporting the deaths of about 180 people in Haiti's Sept-Sol this weekend. The National Human Rights Defense Network saying a local gang leader planned the attack because he suspected his child was made sick by witchcraft. More than 100 of the victims were 60 years old or older. The United Nations saying the massacre brings the death toll in Haiti this year to 5,000 people. The U.S. military temporarily pausing flights of its V-22 Osprey fleet after another one of those aircrafts crashed. Weakened metal components in an Osprey aircraft broke mid-flight in New Mexico last month. That caused an engine failure. The Osprey is designed to fly both like a helicopter and an airplane. Its recent mechanical issues are similar to another Osprey crash last year off the coast of Japan, where 8 people were killed. And superstar outfielder Juan Soto set to sign the largest contract in Major League Baseball history. Soto, who helped bring the Yankees to the World Series this season, agreeing to a 15-year, $765 million deal just across town with the New York Mets. The 4-time All-Star will receive a $75 million signing bonus. Thanks so much for watching Top Story. I'm Ellison Barber in New York. Stay right there. More news is on the way.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.